All right, folks, we got a show for you here today. This has been in the making for quite a while, which is why you haven't seen many episodes of any of our shows on our site here lately. But this is going to start the ball rolling here. And joining me, of course, is Mr. Chris Kiebzak here. And today's topic, we're going to pick the best song, our favorite song from each of the Alice Cooper studio albums. And folks, how many are there, Chris? Like 30?
Uh, there's 20, what is it, 27?
It's definitely damn close to
Oh
30,
no,
that's
more
for
than
sure.
that. No, it's about, I think it's 30 or 31 now with the new one. Yes.
Yeah, there's that's why it took us so long to go through here because I had to catch up on a lot of these albums that, I never really had before. I never had the catalog, and I'll start off by telling. So Cooper, obviously, for me, I remember back in like, man, it must have been like the late 70s. One of my friends had an Alice Cooper album, and I remember hearing him play it when I went over to his house. We were doing some other stuff, but I remember, I don't know if he was playing it or parents, somebody was playing Alice Cooper. So that's when I first became acquainted with Mr. Alice Cooper. And I don't know the album or the tour. I just remember that hearing him play that. And then obviously school's out, that's something the kids were singing on the school buses the last day of school back in the day, man. That's everybody would go nuts, throw stuff out the windows and stuff on the way home from school. I tell you, we all kinds of crazy people back in the day. But and then obviously a career rejuvenation with the Trash album with Poison, which was a huge, huge hit. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing it back at that point in time. So and then ever since, Alice Cooper's been doing his thing ever since. This guy's a true legend, and he's just always out there. He's still putting out new music, and that's the kind of thing you got to appreciate because nowadays, how many people just live off their back catalog and don't even make the attempt to make new albums? You know what I mean? So kudos to Mr. Cooper. Now, obviously, you're a lot younger than me, but tell us about how you came about getting involved with Mr. Alice Cooper here.
So Alice for me, and I've said this before regarding Kiss, but my dad taught me how to ride a bike in the early 90s. I was born in 88. And he mentioned to me about these artists, Kiss and Alice Cooper, and what they did. So before it just hit my head on, oh, this guy does a show and he's like a magician and he has all these things on stage. So that hit my head hard. When I went home, it's all I could talk about for the next couple of weeks to my dad, pressuring him to let me buy to get me a cassette at the time to hear what this was or to be able to see or so his buddy had vinyl and against my mother's wishes of showing me this at such a young age, he went and got me two records. He got Kiss Destroyer and he gave me Killer. And that just set me off. And for the next 30 years of my life, I've been buying everything and getting everything. And I think to make it short but sweet, I think my love for Alice from the beginning until now comes from the variety in his catalog. To me, he is the only artist that really his character went with the times. You've seen Alice as a pop guy, you've seen Alice as a metal guy, you've seen Alice as a garage rock guy, you've seen Alice now going back with the old band for this new record, which is out of nowhere. I mean, I feel him constantly trying to please himself with who Alice is what makes the fans so lucky. And like you said, we have 30 plus albums to be able to listen to from him. And he hasn't stopped. He tours 200 days a year between his four or five projects he always has going. And that never takes away. Even if he does a huge Hollywood vampire tour, he's still doing Alice shows that year. The guy's never off the road. He's constantly working, constantly releasing material. But I think the big thing is every album tells a new story. Now, and there's obviously a theme that albums sort of connect. Brutal Planet and Dragontown, Dirty Diamonds and Eyes of Alice Cooper, Welcome to My Nightmare, and Goes to Hell. They all sort of connect, but then it goes on to something else. Then you get four new wave pop type albums. Then you get back to the garage rock era. So I think it always is fresh. And while some of the records throughout time took me a little while to grow on me, they eventually do because you always hear something different in someone like Alice, who is constantly creating new ideas, characters, situations, nightmares. So that's my love for Cooper is very, very deep.
All right, so we're going to go chronologically through this, and you're going to give a quick breakdown on each album right before, and then we're going to pick each song as we go along. So, in other words, we'll start off with the first album. You'll tell a little bit about it. You'll
Yep.
give your song, which song you feel is the best, and I'll give mine, and we'll just move on to the next and keep them chronologically all the way from beginning to end.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
All right, take her
All
away.
right. All right. So the first album, released in June of 1969, Pretty's for You. Now, this was released on Frank Zappa's Straight Records. The cover painting was done by Ed Cariff, which I love that painting, and that cover. Very, very odd and avant-garde almost. But Pretty's for You was the first album. Obviously, the first two albums was their introduction to what they were going to do. While you do hear later qualities or even middle of the year's qualities Alice in this record, there's not really too much where you're like, oh, that's Alice Cooper. It is very weird, very bizarre. They're obviously trying out a lot of things, but for me the best song on the album is Fields of Regret. This is an album I don't necessarily go back to too much. The last time I re-listened to it before this was about a year and a half ago when I got an original copy of the vinyl, and I was like, I haven't listened to it in a few years. Let's listen to it. And that song, Fields of Regret, is definitely one of my favorites on the or my favorite on the album. I think it's the most like old school Alice. Um, and I feel like the only other song that I really enjoy on the record, even now, is Today Muller, which I think is a pretty funny song and a quirky song. So, Fields of Regret is my choice for Pretties for You.
All right, well, I got a different song here. I'm going with Living, which
Wow,
is
okay.
probably out of the songs on the album, it's one of the catchier songs to me. Obviously, you got to remember this album was a mix of eclectic sounds from that time period, a lot of psychedelic references, and so at the time of its release, it mainly deemed a very critical and commercial failure. And even going back on it today, I think people can appreciate it more for what it is, but it still isn't, a lot of bands have that first album where they'll have a few good hits on, a few radio airplays. This one doesn't really have much as it only peaked at number 193. But, the fact that it did peak definitely showed you that, they had something or else, they wouldn't have charted at all. So
Right.
not too high, mind you, 7 spots away from not making the charts, but solid album. Like you said about the cover, pretty cool, a little different compared to what of things to come for sure.
Right.
All right, take
All
her
right.
away.
So number two. So, and here's the thing you mentioned. I mean, you got to remember these guys were all like best friends from school, and they were teenagers when these albums came out. So they were just finding their footing, right? But with every album, you can, or with these two specifically, you can sort of see where things are connecting because I do feel like Easy Action is a much stronger album than Pretties for You. Still not exactly what Alice would become, especially for the next four records with the original band. But Easy Action still has a song that I go back to a lot. I've always loved this song, and that's Below Your Means. Feel it has a good groove, and again, it sort of shows you what is going to become with Alice and his discography. The number two for me would be Still No Air, which I also think is a very strong song on the record.
Okay, so Easy Action, to me was definitely another extension of the first album in ways, it was, but I did the song that does it for me is Shoe Salesman,
Oh,
interestingly
yeah,
enough.
an interesting song.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
the one thing that was strange about Easy Action was, I think it has the sophomore jinx because it never charted.
right.
He obviously Pretty for You barely charted. This one didn't chart. Um, but then I think as we pick up and move on here into the 70s, you're definitely going to see a lot more chart action.
Right, right, absolutely. All right. So then we're going to go on. Now we're getting to album number three. And this is when, in my opinion, the discography kicks off. From this album on, a lot of people consider this the first album. Obviously, we just proved it's not. But this record is where it almost didn't happen, actually. I mean, with the failure of the first two records, they were pretty wary about doing another album with Alice. Now, what ended up happening was Bob Ezrin convinced Warner Brothers to work with this new young dude who they really thought had it and knew was going to go far in the industry as a producer, and that's Bob Ezrin. Once they brought Bob Ezrin into the fold, and you know Bob Ezrin from Pink Floyd fame, Kiss fame,
Mhm.
I mean the producer that really put out some of the best records of all time. And he started working with the band for a significant amount of time and then would leave and come back and working with Alice. But Love It to Death is one of the cornerstones and masterpieces in the catalog, because this is what started it all as far as what Alice Cooper would be and become. So it was released in February of 1971, and it just loaded with great songs, obviously 18. But my favorite song on the record is Ballad of Dwight Fry. While might be a little overplayed in the Alice world, it's still, I can never get enough of that song. And I would go see him if he played that song 16 times in a row and ended it. Probably my favorite song in the Alice discography, and the whole visual behind it with the straitjacket and everything um, will always live in people's minds after they go to an Alice show. Just the melodicness, the weirdness with the baby voice and the kid voice in the beginning, um, the structure of the song when it gets harder at the end, when he obviously breaks free from the jacket. I mean, listening to this song, you can see all the visuals in your head as you listen to it. So my choice from Love It to Death, Ballad of Dwight Fry.
Okay. And like you said, the band's breakthrough. This is the album that really got them on the map, and everything was all, smell like roses from there on up there. This is the one that got them out there, recognized, peaked at number 35. So you go from not on the charts at all the way to a top 50 album, basically, number 35.
Right.
And I agree. Ballad of Dwight Fry is also my favorite.
No.
And it was a little close. There was about three other ones to choose from besides Ballad of Dwight Fry, but when I break down, this one is just unique. The other ones are more singles, and you hear them on the radio all the time, but this is one of those ones. I don't think that gets hardly any airplay nowadays. You don't
No.
hear the 6-minute song on 97 Rock,
No.
not like you hear the main hits of Alice Cooper, but it
Right.
deserves to be because just a great song. So Ballad of Dwight Fry is awesome. I'm glad we actually agreed on one because I don't think we're going to
We might
agree
not.
on much more. So I was kind of surprised when you said it. So
I know we don't agree too often because
well, we never I was going to mention in the beginning of the show how many do you think we'll agree on, just to see. And I
yeah.
was going to say I'll be lucky if we get one or two, and here's one right off the first three albums, but I don't think it's going to last. It's going to stay that the rest of
Well,
the
I,
way.
I really had to put myself in a check and when doing this and think, well, what really hooked me when I was a kid? Like a song
Mhm.
like we'll just use it as an example because it's not on my list, but like Poison, like that probably is my top three, but it's so overplayed that I wouldn't choose that. Like I would
Mhm.
choose to omit it from a set list if I had the opportunity, but it still is in like my, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's very weird, but it's a kid. So I really had to, I thought a lot about this list and I wasn't going to just pick B-sides and I wasn't just going to pick the songs that I loved as a kid either. I had to really see where it sits for me now. So all right, so moving on. So now we're going to get to the album which may have the most known Alice songs on a single record, and that is going to be Killer, that was released in November of 71. 2023 Deluxe Remaster came out, which included a show from Puerto Rico in 1972 on audio, which was never heard before this, at least in that quality, and it's amazing if nobody heard it before. But moving on to the actual record, so Killer starts off strong with one of my favorite songs on the record, Under My Wheels, and that was very close to being my top choice because that song
Hmm.
always hits me right here, especially when it's played live. Um, but with so many songs on it, and you mentioned for the last record, Love It to Death, about the uniqueness of songs and how, with you saying that, it reminded me that they do like the uniqueness of songs stand out. And for me, that's why my choice is Halo of Flies, which while long, it tells an extreme story over 7 minutes. That you never get bored of. It changes constantly. We had the chance to see it live at work. I've seen it live a few times, but I remember seeing it with you and it worked really well. My first time seeing it, I didn't know if the band was going to pull it off live. But even these guys, the original band, really shine here on this song, Halo of Flies, with their songwriting and their extreme ability to be able to play, which I think sometimes was hidden behind the Alice Cooper thing of Alice himself, was how good the band actually was. And I think that shines here. Um, but yeah, also, I don't know if you know this, but I wanted to fill you on this. Did you know Rick Derringer played on two songs on this record? Did you know that?
No.
He played on Under My Wheels and he played on Yeah, Yeah, Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So that's just a nice little tidbit that I don't think a lot of people know. But yeah, so my choice for Killer out of the 8 songs, because it is a short record, but they're all hits in my book. But my choice, Halo of Flies.
Okay. So for this album, I went to probably the old trusty standby is what you would call it. Wasn't intentional. It's just that that's what I feel is my strongest song. But I will say it was a choice between this one and Under My Wheels, but I went with Be My Lover, which peaked at number 49 and was the highest charting of the two songs on the charts. Didn't crack the top 40, but still, that was close at number 49. And yeah, it's one of those songs that, he still plays a lot and probably always will. Just one of the, this is one you definitely hear, more on the radio than some of the other ones. But to me, I just always thought it was a cool song. So that's why I've got Be My Lover for that album.
Awesome. All right. So now we're going to move on to, you mentioned this song earlier and how big it was for kids at that era, especially. And I remember even in the 90s, kids singing Schools Out, and me being like, oh, now you want to talk about Alice Cooper, but all singing Schools Out at the end of the year every year in Catholic school in the 90s.
Mm.
Um, but the next record, June 1972, it comes out, Schools Out, one more song than its predecessor at 9 songs, also produced by Ezrin, also got the deluxe reissue. For vinyl in 2023. Also included a live show from that tour that's brilliant. So School's Out itself reached number 1 in the UK. I believe it reached number 7 in the US as a hit. That was the first hit off the record. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the only number 1 hit in the UK, and that's the furthest it got in the US was number 7. But as far as songs, loaded with good material. I love Looney Tune. School's Out, obviously a banger. My Stars is good. But I think the best song on the album is Gutter Cat versus the Jets. Again, I wanted to go with uniqueness, songs that I remember listening to the School's Out record just to hear this song again. While I don't feel this record is that strong, um, as far as the whole discography is concerned. It definitely plays well throughout. And when this song comes up, you can really hear the uniqueness and especially for that time period, bringing back the old school like gang fight thing and how it worked live. And just again, just the story and sort of being able to go into a fantasy while you're listening to a song is big for me. So Gutter Cat versus the Jets, my choice from the record.
All right. Well, I had no choice. This is one of those rare instances here where I had to go with the title track.
Yeah,
It's just it's just a classic song, and to me, it just kind of knocked everything else out of the park. I mean, there were no other um, charting singles on this album or anything. But unique thing is that every original member of this band had a hand in writing that song. So I like that because that was the only song on the album where they all wrote it together.
that's a good point. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So, all right.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, and I think with Schools Out, with how big that record was based on the one song, I think some of the other songs got underlooked. But again, I don't feel the record is extremely strong, but my second choice would have been School's Out as well, because I do think it's the strongest song on the album besides Gutter Cat by far. And like you said, them all having a hand with it. And as we're going to see, it may have been one of the last songs that all of them had a hand in, period, together. Because while the next album might be their shining light throughout the whole discography, this is where all the problems sort of started seeping in. But you wouldn't be able to tell from the tour videos or from the record itself. And that's 1973's Billion Dollar Babies, which Ezrin obviously also did. It was constructed in three studios over 6 months between touring like he always does. He's going to do shows around writing a record, and that's what they did back then too. Alice was obviously still dealing with his demons, really bad in the alcohol, and as was Glenn. Glenn, this is the album where Glenn Buxton, the guitar player, rest in peace. This is where he sort of started pulling himself out. There's rumors that the only song he's on the album is Generation Landslide. So this is where things got a little murky. There'd be one more album of the original band to go after this, but this is by far probably commercially the biggest album that Alice Cooper, the original band, ever had, and maybe period. But this is also where a lot of cracks started to surface that wouldn't be really noticeable until after the album's touring cycle. So Billion Dollar Babies, my favorite song on the record, and this is going to surprise you, is going to be the title track, Billion Dollar Babies, which I also don't do often as pick, but I do believe it's the most well-crafted song. It's the song that really sold me. After Billion Dollar Baby was the next Alice release I got after Killer. And it blew my mind. Like I loved Alice based on that album Killer, but after Billion Dollar Babies, it all made sense because all of those um good things about those records are all in one place, and the whole record is a good thing. So Billion Dollar Baby to me is probably the strongest of the original lineup. And yeah, I got to go with the title track.
All right, well, we're different on this one.
Oh, wow. See, I thought we might agree on this one too.
No. So, yeah, the album reached number one. And like you said, that's probably where a lot of you know, it happens. Fame gets to the best of people.
Yeah.
Tensions start creeping in, weird things happen, and then, it's a shame, but at least they were able to pump out another album before you know, the split came. So with Billion Dollar Babies, I am going, this song that I'm picking is definitely a known song. On a lot of these early albums, so far it looks like I'm picking like the singles or something, but that's not the
Hmm.
reason why they're getting picked. They're getting picked because when I listened to the album, from beginning to end and went back and re-listened to some of the songs that maybe I wasn't quite familiar with, I had to go back to this song. And this song I've always loved. It's always been great. And I was actually surprised that it only hit number 25 on the charts. I really am. It sounds like it was a top 10 smash of all the times I've ever heard it, but obviously I went with No More Mr. Nice Guy. Just a
Gotcha.
great song. And the first time I ever seen him do it live was great. And that was on that Queensryche tour with Heaven and Hell.
Yep.
Just a great show.
Yeah. It's awesome. You actually have video of that, I think, somewhere of him doing Nice Guy. But yeah, I mean, a lot of big songs off of this. I thought you were going to pick Elected, which is also a song that sort of gets overlooked and he never really plays it until election years. But yeah, I mean, what a record. Just the cover, not really knowing what you're getting into, the bill in the middle that you get out of the record. I mean, this is where this was peak fandom for young, especially young and teenagers in the rock and world in the 70s. And I think Billion Dollar Babies is one of those top five albums from that era that really shine. So now we're going to move to the last album of the original band. This was released in November of 1973, another record Glenn barely plays on, if at all. And this was produced by Jack Richardson and Jack Douglas. This is where Ezrin was out. Um, and they recorded their working title for this album is A Kiss and a Fist. They ended up going with Muscle of Love. Obviously, I thought the idea was really cool as a young kid, teenager discovering that record with the box with the stain on it, and we all know
Mm.
what that's supposed to be. And I mean, what else in that time period, we couldn't just go on the phone and see pictures. You had to, you had to go and steal your dad's magazines. And that's what that whole thing was. And I thought that was brilliant. However, the album itself, not the greatest. Not a huge fan of Muscle of Love. Obviously, all the wounds in Black and Blues were there. It shows that the band was not in tune during this record at all. This is where obviously Shep and other people were sort of trying to convince Alice, like, well, what happened was the guys wanted to do solo records, almost like the Kiss thing. The guys wanted to do solo records. Shep tried talking them out of it and said, if you guys do solo records, Alice is going to do a solo record. And I don't think that's going to be good for the band. And sure enough, that's what happened. So you really see the cracks here in Muscle of Love. But there's two saving graces on the record, Man with the Golden Gun, and then what I think is the best song on the album. Again, the title track, Muscle of Love. Just great guitar riff. Again, the story is hilarious and really, you really got to read between the lines, which I thought was great as a kid trying to figure it out. And just the guitar riff, one of the first Alice songs I ever learned on guitar because it's such a, it's such a energetic riff, which bouncy riff. Just a great song altogether. Still works well live. Great vocals on there. One of my favorite vocal styles from Alice is on that record. So yeah, Muscle of Love title track.
All right. So from Muscle of Love, my pick. This, like you said, I agree. This album definitely isn't quite, you were hoping it would have been in the same vein as the last few, but unfortunately it isn't. Obviously without Bob Ezrin missing is a big, big piece missing. And the weird thing is that Jack Douglas was involved in this album because obviously 73 was also the same year that the debut Aerosmith album came out, and
Yeah.
I think Douglas produced 74. So this album kind of was his precursor before he got to really be known as a big time producer. In 74, Get Your Wings. So this was before that. Um, so what we got here for me is a song that I never really knew, before. But when I listened to everything, this one definitely stood out above the top of the mountain for me. And this is probably going to shock you. So I've got Big Apple Dreamin', Hippo.
Wow. Wow. I thought you were going to say working up a sweat. Yeah. Big Apple Dreaming. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm surprised that that's your favorite. Now, this is why I was so interested in hearing your list because some of these songs through the catalog you're discovering for the first time, right?
Yep.
So, or haven't heard them in years. So it's very interesting, and I'm happy to hear that that's the song that sort of hit for you.
What's the hippo part about? I was trying to find something about that. Do you know why they have that in parentheses?
No, again, I think it was them trying to be weird or trying to be, different, sort of like using an umlaut or whatever. I just think they were trying to be weird.
Okay. All right. So this is the end of the era of this band.
Yeah.
Where do we
Yeah.
go
So,
next? What do we do? What
all
happens?
right. So like you said, it got a little weird with Muscle Love, with Ezrin being out, with the style sort of changing. Now, what I think happened was the band really didn't want the style change. Alice wanted the style change. That's why you have a little bit of an in the middle record that didn't necessarily work, besides the title track, as far as longevity. So Alice does his own thing and he decides, I want to take this more theatrical than ever before. And I want to do a huge band with multiple instruments, with multiple dancers. I just want a whole different thing. Let's try it this way without the band being the core part of this show. And that's what he did with Nightmare. And again, the album just brilliant in every way. It's first solo album. I mean, you have Dick Wagner, Steve Hunter on guitar, which they both more or less studio musicians that played with anybody and everybody in that time, but they shine on this record and other Alice records, as we'll see. Um, But so this came out in March 1975. Ezrin was back in the fold. They recorded the record in Toronto. Um, and again, I we finally get 100. This is where we start getting 30 different styles of music and 8 to 12 songs on each record. And that's what, again, like I said earlier, that's where I think Alice shines. Everything's a story. And having Alice having nightmares being the main focal point here. There was so much they can do. So, songs like Some Folks and Devil's Food and Black Widow just all add this huge story. But there's two that have always stood out on this record for me. I remember getting this cassette from Media Play in 1995 and putting it into my cassette player with my headphones on in the back of my mom's car and just falling in love. These two songs specifically are ones that I wore the tapes out on, and that's Escape, but my number one best song on the record, Department of Youth, which I still think stands true today and just sort of says where the world is at any given time. But I love that song. I love the breakdown in the song. It sounds like it's going to be a mean, gnarly song, but really it's about preserving the youth and taking what the youth is at any given point and holding them up and letting them choose how the world's going to go. And Department of Youth is speaks volumes to me even today as a musician, as a kitchen manager, as everything I do in life. Department of Youth really helps me remember why I do what I do and why I love what I love in the first place. So that's my number one.
Okay. Well, that's some good choices. Yeah, this album definitely had some really good strong songs on it. Obviously it's this is a big album of his, and considering the band folded up and he started out on his own here, it peaked at number 5 right off the bat and stands today as one of his main crowning glories because obviously he even came out with a sequel to this album called Welcome to My Nightmare 2. But for me, it's always been about one song. The one song that I've always loved, and if I ever see him in concert and he doesn't play it, I'm gonna jump up on there and shake him till he does. Only Women Bleed. Definitely my favorite song on this album, and it might very well be my top three for sure with Cooper. Just love that song. Love this version. Just great. Interesting thing it was Phil Ramone actually engineered that one particular song on this album. Surprisingly, I didn't know that. That's the one thing you're going to see with Cooper. He's worked with so many people, and some of those later '80s albums and things, so many guest stars on it and things. But we'll just highlight. We could spend an hour probably going over every single person that is a known musician that
Right.
plays on some of these albums. But we'll try to keep it to just the main highlights. But I do want to mention on this one. The great Tony Levin plays bass on Welcome to My Nightmare and the song you mentioned, Escape. So just wanted to bring that
Yeah.
up to everybody.
But
Okay.
no, and I'm glad you said that about, just sort of picking little things because there's so much we could talk about as far as musicians, like you said. But if and when we ever do a full breakdown of the catalog, I think it'll be more appropriate then. So I'm not touching too much on all of that, but it is
Right.
good. There is a lot of people like if I don't think like the Rick Derringer thing, I didn't think you would know or a lot of other people would know. We got to put it in the Tony Levin thing, same thing. So. Um, awesome. All right. So now we're going to move on to what is basically an untitled sequel to Welcome to My Nightmare. They went in the studio specifically to record a sequel to Welcome to My Nightmare at that time, and it's called Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, which obviously wasn't a direct sequel. You just mentioned that. We'll see later. There is a sequel to Nightmare, but at this time they wanted to do something where Alice has a new nightmare, and that's going to hell. So I really love this album. I It took a while for some songs to click with me, including what is now my number one on the record. But again, it's because of the diversity and that every song can sound different, especially when you're in Alice Nightmare. He goes through different phases and um things happen where the music is going to change, the styles are going to change, the tone is going to change. And that's what I love about all these records. But Goes to Hell definitely shines on that. Um, and this album has a song that I'm normally not a ballad guy, as we all know by now, but I Never Cry, I feel just such a great, huge ballad and huge song that really resonates with me even today. But my number one, and this is going to be weird for you, is "You Gotta Dance," which might be the weirdest song on the record, and just so much going on and so much different styles in one song and instruments. But I really love the dirtiness of it. I feel it still has the Alice vibe, and it's just it's a funny song too, which once in a while I gravitate towards on the Alice albums. The funny innuendo songs I'm not always a huge fan of, but once in a while they are the strongest on the record for me. And even though I love Guilty and the song Go to Hell specifically, You Gotta Dance has to be my number one on the record.
All right. Well, mine was when we did our top Alice Cooper songs. This song was high on my list, and at that time, I didn't really know. I wasn't too familiar with the song, believe it or not. And it was a song you just mentioned, of course, but this is my number one on this one without a doubt. It's the only song that looks like it was released as a single from this album, surprisingly. And that's peaking at number 12. We're talking about I Never Cry.
Yep.
Just great song. That's definitely one of the highlights of the whole catalog. And I think that song just doesn't really get its just due. Even though it peaked at number 12, it's like radio ignored it, classic rock radio at least,
Yeah.
once it got out of the 70s and we started getting into the 80s and 90s. They don't go back and play a lot of these songs, which is kind of surprising. And these songs are so good. How can they not? You
Well, I
know?
Never Cry was a single, and it was a pretty big single back
But
then.
I never heard it on 97 Rock, and I still don't to this day. They never
Right.
play it.
No.
They rarely ever. You never hear. If you might hear it on like if they do like some kind of a, maybe they're gonna do an Alice Cooper, Alice Goes to Hell, and they'll play a song from that particular album where they go through them or something. But I've never heard it. Just it's a crime really how some of these songs just don't really get the play, in classic
Well,
rock
here,
radio. They should because classic rock radio was more geared towards deep cuts and album tracks, not necessarily the singles. You know what I'm saying? So you
right,
figure you would have
absolutely.
heard it a lot more because it's just a great song. So
Absolutely.
that's the sad part about it. But
Here's something interesting. I'm
mhm.
surprised you probably, because you haven't mentioned this. Poison covers I Never Cry on that cover album with Brett singing it, and it sounds great. But I Never Cry is on that cover album they did. What was that album called? I have the,
Poisoned, I think.
yeah, Poisoned. Yeah, I Never Cry is on that record. And it's awesome. It sounds great. It's either that, is it? Yeah, yeah. Because then Ricky's solo album, he covers Elected, I believe. But I Never Cry is on that Poisoned record, and it sounds pretty good. So if you haven't revisited it in a while, definitely check it out.
All right, so we're already halfway through past the halfway mark of the 70s here.
Yeah, yeah, we're getting there. We're still only getting up to album number 10 though. So we're about, we're slowly getting there. But all right, so number 10, we're going to go with an album released in 1977. I believe this is an extremely underrated album. Wasn't one that clicked with me when I was a kid so much. Took till about my late teens when I started going through his catalog again, where I really got hooked to it. And that's Lace and Whiskey, also produced by Ezrin. Um, Again, just a fun record. Really trying to go with that old school 50s and 60s vibe mixed with what Alice Cooper's known for from the 70s on until this point, to 1977. But not a huge album for Alice. It's Hot Tonight, probably being one of the bigger songs from that record that I know got some radio play, but again, like you said, just sort of disappeared into the ether. But my favorite song on Lace and Whiskey is going to be King of the Silver Screen, which is the most interesting song on the record to me. And it really resonated with me as far as growing up and saying that I can do that. I want to be, and that's how I was with music. Like, I want to be on the stage. I want to be. So, him talking about how he wants to be, how Alice has this vision to be an actor and a big movie star always sort of hit me, to where I can see where Alice was wanted to go, even though if publicly wasn't going to be pushed there. So this song is sort of like a love letter to him wanting to be an actor as a kid, and I love that. But the whole musicianship and the throwbacks to different styles and different songs, specifically from the 50s and 60s, always really interested me. So King of the Silver Screen is my number one.
Okay. So mine, we're gonna go unfortunately back to the bigger song on the album here, and we're going with "You and Me."
Good one.
Another song that I never really was too familiar with, and just really love. And it just, to me, it just can't be topped on this album. But I do like this album much better than its predecessor. I can tell you that much. Lace and Whiskey was definitely a lot stronger of an album, even though it didn't chart as high. But that's the reason why I think a lot of that happened too, because they only released as far as singles go. And that's the weird thing is how they didn't release a ton of singles. There was that one, which You and Me obviously peaked all the way at number 9. But
Right.
then they released their next one was No More Love at Your Convenience, and it didn't even chart.
Yeah, no, that tanked. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but it was weird how on Alice Cooper Goes to Hell they only released the one single too. So I'm not quite sure, what the record company's process was there. But obviously now we're getting into the disco era. So obviously this is where all the disco stuff started getting on the charts. So the fact that he was able to get a song to crack the top 10 is definitely a good on his part and a good thing. But unfortunately, um, the 70s we'll move on here with that. But I love Lace and Whiskey though. I think that's one of his stronger albums from the 70s.
Sure. Absolutely. All right. So now we're getting well, so now I just want to put it out there that in between this time, after that record, after Lace and Whiskey gets released, he puts out his first live album in December of 1977 called The Alice Cooper Show, which a lot of Alice fans weren't a huge fan of initially, but then it gained a lot of momentum as being a live record. Great album. If you guys haven't checked it out, The Alice Cooper Show. And then we're gonna go on. So we're reaching the last album of the 70s, which is going to be From the Inside. Now, this is a record written with Bernie Taupin, who was Elton John's lyricist and a big name. He also would coincidentally get Alice down sort of a bad path later on. But for now, Alice ended up going into an insane asylum for his alcoholism. And he writes a record after he comes out with Bernie called From the Inside. Basically a concept album about all the people he met inside locked up and what he learned there, what he met, what he learned about Alice, what he learned about himself. So coming out, he puts out this album that I think really hit hard. I love this record. I think it has great ballad, How You Gonna See Me Now on the record. But my favorite is it was between two. It was between Sirius and the title track, and I gotta go with the title track because I remember the first time hearing it, and you almost feel like you're inside an asylum. I mean, what he's talking about, the lyrics, the whole feel and vibe. And I feel it's a classic Alice track that's still played randomly through the years. I've seen it a couple times. He'll pull it out. Just a great song. I don't think this album is as strong as some people say it is. It doesn't hook me all the way through anymore like it used to. But again, some real bangers on this, and I got to go with the title track.
Okay. Yeah, so for this album for me, it peaked at number 60, so he's still going, going the wrong way on the throughway here.
Right.
But for me, I went with The Quiet Room.
Oh, didn't see that coming.
Really like that song. That was definitely the one for me that stands out the most on here to me. There's a couple other ones that were okay, but obviously The Quiet Room was just head and shoulders above the rest, that's all.
Yeah. Cool. And I just want to make a quick note that the song Sirius also features Steve Lukather on
Oh,
guitar, which is interesting. It's the only song he played on the record, but I'm a big Lukather fan, and I think him, Sirius, that guitar riff, you could totally hear is him. So Good album, but obviously, like you said, sometimes as a full going the opposite way. So that's going to bring us to an era, like I said earlier, Bernie Taupin got sort of put Alice down a bad path with drugs. So Alice relapsed, didn't go back to the drinking, but did start doing drugs. And this is where we're going to get into four albums that are what he considers his lost years, his lost albums. He barely remembers recording them, very rarely dips into them for shows, even though we see it now. The last few tours he's been dipping in for the last 10 years, so that's really awesome. But a lot of these albums have, for me, some real some some real shiners here that a lot of people might have just sort of slipped under the rug with Alice because of how messed up he was. Some of these albums he didn't tour for, some he was so messed up that some of the shows got canceled. I mean, it was really a bad time for Alice. But they did start with Flush the Fashion, which was released in May 1980. And again, this is the first of the Lost Four albums. And like you said, Alice sort of the character follows patterns sometimes. The classic rock, disco. Now we're getting into the new wave and punk, and he was sort of experimenting with that kind of stuff. Very weird sounds, long intros to songs, outros. Um, Weird material that normally would Alice wouldn't run with as far as styles, but we see it here. So yeah, this was produced by Davy Johnstone and Fred Mandel. Um, what's interesting about this record is all but three songs were played on this tour. So every song except three of them were played from this record. I think that's the first and last time he played that many new songs in a show. My favorite on the record, hands down, is a song that he brought back a few years ago and just shines, a song that the Smashing Pumpkins ended up covering. And the song is Clones. It's my number one pick. Very different. I like the back and forth with multiple Alices. The video was awesome. Um, and just the whole idea of Alice cloning himself and having multiple Alices out there was hilarious to me as a kid. And the song just really hits hard for me. Very good, unique song.
All right. Well, to me, there was a no doubt about it on this one, and I went with Pain.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Great song.
Yeah. That's a really good song.
Just loved it. That's one of those ones that catches your attention, and to me, I don't know. It just seemed like compared to the rest of them, it seemed like old school Alice in a way.
Sure. Yeah, definitely that vibe could have fit on a 70s record for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I got to see him play it live once in Pittsburgh and it was awesome. Very rarely pulls that out. Besides this tour, I think that's the only time he played it. I think it was
Wow.
2015.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
but yeah, but yeah, it's a very good song and definitely was in the running for best song on the album on my list too. So that's going to bring us to the second album of these Lost Four, and that is going to be what I feel is one of well, it's up there with the strongest. I do love this era and Special Forces,
Hmm.
which was released in August 1981. I love the cover because it's very ominous. You don't really know what it is. You got the sword on the picture, and with Alice, you don't really know what's going on. This is where you can see that his image was sort of starting to change. Even in this picture on the album cover, he's gaunt. You could tell he's sort of let himself go a little bit. And that's sort of what the album sounds like. Again, all over the place, very weird and kooky, but really stuck to me through the years. A lot of great songs on here that I could have picked. You Look Good in Rags is, I think, classic Alice and was going to be my number one. But um, after seeing Who Do You Think We Are open the show, a short version, open the show this last year for Alice, it reminded me of how much that song I loved through my life. The title track, or what that was supposed to be the album of the title of the album, but Who Do You Think We Are is by far my favorite song on the record, followed close second by You Look Good in Rags. That'd be my choice.
All right. So I've actually got Who Do You Think We Are?
Oh, cool. Another match. Nice.
Yep. Yep. That one definitely. Looking back at that album for me, just stood out the most. I would
And it has
say,
that classic Alice vibe, I feel too.
yeah, yeah. That one was a little tough because, well, I mean, it was actually easier because a lot of the other songs kind of all sounded the same to me. Nothing really stood out too much compared to this one. I thought this was head and shoulders above the rest, and it's probably one of the reasons why they put it first, because it was such a strong song.
Yeah, great opening track. Lots of lyrically, emotionally, it just screams Alice. I feel that song should have been bigger for him. I
Hmm.
feel it should be a staple in his set. What a great opener. But yeah, so that's going to bring us to the third album in this weird little series of Alice's Blackout, and that's going to be maybe the weirdest of all the album, all of these four records, and that's going to be, and maybe the weirdest in his entire catalog, and that's going to be Zipper Catches Skin. Um, very odd record. The album cover is odd with just all the words, and it's very hard and to put it together. And what am I looking at? And then you put it on, and what am I listening to? But the songs will eventually grow on you. By far, like I said, the weirdest, probably the worst of these four albums, but there are a couple savers on it, and that include Tag Your It, and then my favorite on the record is Zorro's Ascent, which again, I think it might be the weirdest on this weirdest hodgepodge record. But it does have the most character to me and the most uniqueness that I don't feel I felt on a lot of the preceding Alice records in his solo career. So I have to go with Zorro's Ascent, which I think might be his most original solo album output.
Okay, well, we can clearly see this is where he really kind of fell out of the public eye and started the downward spiral here. Never charted this album. The last album, Special Forces, hit 125. So as the albums go on here, we start to see a pattern where they're just not selling like he once was.
Right.
And you can blame a lot of things. Like you said, the punk movement started to come in the early 80s, and then pop really took over big. And then you started seeing the evolution of hair bands started kind of forming a little bit in the early 80s. You got the hard rock of like bands like Dio and Def Leppard comes along, and all these other bands are starting to catch fire and transcend. While the older acts, if they're not coming out with strong material, you can see them going downhill, unfortunately.
Right.
Now, this album for me, I picked I Am the Future
Mm. That's an interesting pick. It's a good
because I
song.
saw I saw the future of Cooper was going to rise once again. How does that sound?
There you go. Yeah, no, that's a good song. It's a good pick. Again, very weird album. Might be in the top of his worst albums, I think. But again, if you're going to listen to all four of these weird albums in a row, they sort of connect and make sense. But as a standalone, it's sort of hard to really put it together and what the hell am I listening to kind of thing. But that's going to bring us to the last album of this era. And to me, probably the strongest. And that is going to be 1983's Dada, which is a very weird album cover and very weird list of songs when you look at it. What is this going to sound like? And again, it's a lot stronger than it seems like on paper. There's some good songs on here like Enough's Enough, formerly Warmer. Fresh Blood was going to be my main choice, but after listening through it again, Scarlet and Sheba by far is the old school Alice atmosphere. The whole intro being very ominous and leading to this song that's melodic and it reminds me of the classic songs where you could see it on stage before it was ever even played live, and you can see what's going to happen based on the song, a very theatrical song, just based on the lyrics and the vibe on itself. But I feel it's a very underrated song in his catalog and should definitely be showcased more. And hopefully one day it will be played live. Scarlet and Sheba.
Okay. Now, the one I got here is definitely one that I never really, this album actually isn't easy to find nowadays, believe it or not. I was looking it up just to try to order it because I didn't have it, obviously. And they want, I mean, it was like over $50 for it on all the different formats, eBay and everything, because it's
Oh,
just not
for
out. It's not in print anymore
for
on
what,
on
CD?
CD. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to get.
some of these. So I ended up getting the box set, which had it in, which was nice. It was a little pricey, but at least I got all these albums that probably if I would have gotten them separately would have ended up costing me more. So it worked out okay for that.
Right.
But I went with the former Lee Warmer.
Ah, good. That's a good song. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I
Yeah, it's
like
a
that
great
one.
song. It's different. Definitely has like the quiet loud thing where like it's quiet and then it gets loud and then it gets quiet. Formerly Warmer is a great song. That was my first time actually hearing that song was on the box set that was released, The Life and Crimes of Alice Cooper.
Mm.
Yeah, Formerly Warmer. That's a good one. Did you enjoy any other songs on the record? I can't assume you've heard that record a lot before.
Right, because I didn't have it, and just what that's nothing they would really play off the radio. I thought No Man's Land was pretty cool. That wasn't too bad.
Right,
But other than that, I really wasn't much of a fan. I only heard it a couple times. I try to play it if it's an album I didn't hear before. I try to play it a few times, to try to, see what it was all about. And it just I wouldn't call it his worst. But it's definitely not, one of my top 10 Cooper albums, let's put it that way.
right. All right, well, so after this album, Alice goes to rehab and gets cleaned up. And he gets really nervous and wondering, is the people going to accept me? What do I do? So at this point in 1986, obviously, this album comes out in September 1986. He realizes he needs to go back to his roots. So he takes what's big in music at that point, which is hair, glam metal, for lack of a better word, heavier metal, and he releases the first of two albums that are really where he's trying to find his niche. And I feel the two albums after that he does, and we'll see that in a second. But the first album in that era is Constrictor, which, again, I don't know why people hate on the album cover so much. It's one of my favorite album covers in his catalog, him with the snake in his mouth and the big black circles and lines around his eyes, classic Alice Cooper visual. Um, this album did pretty well. It also had this was the first album Kane Roberts was involved with, and Kip Winger played bass, which obviously he would go on to form Winger after this, but this was sort of his first start where he was able to play with someone as known and together as Alice, and then go out on his own. So this album definitely put out a lot of decent songs. It wasn't a huge album for him, but songs like Teenage Frankenstein and He's Back obviously garnered him a lot of interest. He's Back being in the Friday the 13th series. But my favorite song on the record, by far, is going to be The World Needs Guts, which that guitar riff, this is when we first seen real metal Alice, which I think is, one of his best of his career is when he went into this sort of um, metal, thrash metal, even with hair and glam metal. But my favorite song by far, World Needs Guts, closely followed by the single Teenage Frankenstein. What do you got?
Well, I went with the old trusty He's Back, the man behind the mask.
All right.
So that was like I remember that one when it came out, and that song stood out for me the best. Yeah, Constrictor was the album obviously that led to the start of the comeback trail. It peaked at number 59 and started the trend of him going back in the right direction because you go from a couple albums that didn't chart, you take a few years off, you clean up, and then you come out with a good comeback album that definitely started to get you back in the limelight here a little bit. So definitely a solid, and obviously, it's an album that definitely got some airplay, which helped the next couple albums get moved up here. So,
Yeah, and we should probably mention that it was produced by Boo Hill and Michael Wagner as well. Um, Yeah, good album. And again, like you said, I mean, I think people wanted mean, angry, unpredictable Alice again, and they didn't want happy all over, oh, I'm a punk Alice either. So they sort of this, I think, sort of brought back the OG fans and a lot of the newer, younger teens filled with angst that were listening to things like Motley Crue and stuff like that were going on at the time, early Metallica. So I think he sort of tried to buy into that a little bit. And then the album we got after that, you can sort of see how it got even a little bit stronger than his predecessor, and that's going to be Raise Your Fist and Yell, which I think is where you really see how confident he is back in this kind of mindset that he's the mean horror movie villain Alice, which I think plays the best in his career. Out of all the different times he did that, that's where he really comes back to the forefront, and people go, "Oh yeah, this is why I love him." This album was released in September of '87. It still features Kane Roberts, Kip Winger, and Ken Mary, who would also go on, and also Paul Taylor, who all of them would go on to be in Winger, besides Kane Roberts, obviously. Um, the record was produced and mixed by Michael Wagner, and again, this one probably has uh, more put together songs than I feel Constrictor did. Some really, really, really good ones on here, like Lock Me Up and Prince of Darkness, which was in the movie of the same title that Alice was in. But there's two that really shine for me on this record, and that's Time to Kill, which is never talked about, but classic Alice vibe. But I have to go with the number one and the strongest song on the album. It has to be the single Freedom, which I feel is extremely underlooked in his catalog and a real good Alice Cooper uh, banger that stands up there with No More Mr. Nice Guy, School's Out Under My Wheels. It just never really got that. It never got that push that I feel it needed at the time. So my choice from Raise Your Fist is going to be Freedom.
Interesting. Okay. That's the lead off track on the album, the way to kick it off. Now my song on here actually turns out to be the longest song on the album, which surprisingly, and I went with Prince of Darkness.
Yeah, good song. Title obviously was in the movie, and that's another song that I feel falls really close in the Alice Cooper atmosphere, and why that song never sort of got bigger, or why he doesn't play it live has always been a mystery to me.
This guy has so many albums out, even up to this point, that he could choose
Right.
from. So I can understand why it's not always easy, when you got over. I think anybody that has over 100 songs that are already recorded up to that point in their career, it is hard to, really pick a set list that's going to please everybody because you got to play the customary hits, and then after that, there are definitely going to be a lot of fans like ourselves that are going to want to hear these deep cuts that don't get played a lot, and you can only play so much. That's the sad part about it. So it's
But
one of
what
the
I will say, and he's
uh-huh.
starting to do it now,
Yeah.
he he realizes and the fans like this is the first year where Under My Wheels and Billion Dollar Babies was not played and nobody cared. I thought it was going to be this big thing. I was happy as hell when I seen the list because
Mm.
I scratched off seven or six songs last October um out of the songs I need to see him play. And it was just people don't it with his show and how good he is, nobody cares. So he's the one of the people that actually could get away with it. And I'm waiting for the day he goes out and plays only rare songs for a tour. I'll go see it 100 times. But yeah, it's he's the only one that can do that and no one's gonna get pissed off. If he doesn't play Poison, if he doesn't play Schools Out or Nice Guy, it might be a problem. But to for Under My Wheels and Billion Dollar Babies not to get played and nobody miss it at all, that spoke volumes to me, where I now think that he can get away with not playing some of the hits. But what that does, speaking of hits, so Alice knew he had to do something to get back on the right track. The next album, Trash, was pretty much designed to do that. They hired Desmond Child to come on and write songs, who was the biggest songwriter at that point, working with tons of bands like Kiss and Bon Jovi and you named the bigger bands
Aerosmith.
at that time. Aerosmith. I mean, he worked with new bands to bring them up, and he worked with older bands to bring them up to today's at the time standards. And that's what happened with 1989's Trash. Also, you have to give a lot of credit to the musicians that are on this record, and especially from this era and played live. This album might feature the most people like to be working on a record. I mean, you can't even go through all of them. And then all this you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, the special guests. I mean, John Bon Jovi, Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, Richie Sambora, Steve Lukather again. Kane Roberts comes back. He wrote and played on Bed of Nails. Tom Hamilton plays on there. Joey Kramer, Mark Frazier. I mean, there's just long, long list, especially in these next two albums, Trash and Hey Stupid, where just a lot of guests. Like I said, this album was designed and made to produce hit songs, and that it did with a song that is still an extreme classic today and constantly still played on classic rock radio, and that's Poison. Obviously, a huge song that was very close to being my number one. But this album is so strong to me, and my number two favorite Alice album of all time. This is the one that really, really got me into everything Alice. After I heard this cassette, I went into everything else because of how much I loved this. And I wore this cassette out so much I had to buy two copies. And now I own it on a whole bunch of different formats. But Trash is extremely strong album in my book. And my favorite song on the record by far always has been, always will. Bed of Nails, which I got lucky enough to see a couple times live. He's been reaching back into it. And just what a song. It was on the charts, didn't go too high, should have. But Poison was obviously so big that it just sort of decimated it. But Bed of Nails by far my favorite song on Trash. I'm excited to hear your pick on this.
Well, there's nothing to get excited about because, of course, it's going to be the big one,
Poison. Yeah.
Poison. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's the last time you're probably going to see me pick the hit from the album. But
Yeah, me too, probably. Yeah.
I you can't get away from it. I mean, there's a lot of good songs on here. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But Poison is, and you know me being a big Aerosmith fan, you're probably shocked that I didn't pick Only My Heart Talking because
Yeah.
of Steven Tyler.
Right.
But that was second. So, but
Right.
Poison was a mile ahead of it. There's no denying the power of Poison. It's just a great song. And what else can be said?
Yeah, I mean, while a little corny, maybe some of these songs on the album because of the
Yeah.
time period, still, I mean, just really great crafted songs here, even ones that nobody talks about anymore, like Why Trust You and This Maniac's in Love with You. I think an extremely underrated track on this album is Hell is Living Without You, which is halfway between a ballad and a rocker, and it sort of reminds me of the Bon Jovi song, which is funny because John and Richie Sambora and wrote this with Desmond Child. So there's just a lot of influence on this record, and I really liked what the era did for Alice at that time. And honestly, I feel the two albums he was trying to emulate from other artists from the hair metal and glam metal thing, I feel he released two of the best best albums in that era. In the hair metal thing, he put it out, and he was one that almost started the genre years before, but then these other bands took it, made it into what it was. He latched on, and I feel he just killed it and knocked it out of the park, thanks to a lot of the musicians and thanks to Desmond Child. And that brings us to the follow-up album
Yep.
where I feel like this album, Hey Stupid, is a much stronger record as far as the Alice world and the horror atmosphere and attitude. I feel Hey Stupid is much more raw than Trash was. This was released in July of 91. Again, filled with people and cameos on this record, like Slash and Joe Satriani and Hugh McDonald and John Webster. I mean, there's just so many people. Ozzy sings backup vocals on the record. I mean, there's just so much
Hmm.
on here, but the songs are much more well crafted, I feel. Obviously, it yielded the biggest, probably, the biggest post 70s hit and Feed My Frankenstein, which obviously was smaller than Poison, but I feel that song is nowadays, because of Wayne's World, obviously, is right up there with Poison as far as familiarity and popularity. I feel that song was Hey Stupid's Poison. But again, a lot of great songs on this record. The ballad is one of my favorite ballads of all time. Die for You, I think it's extremely underrated. Hurricane Year is extremely underrated song. And one of my favorites, Little by Little. But the number one song on the album for me, it's going to be Snake Bite, which again just falls right into that Alice world, talking about the snake again. The one thing I like about Alice is he doesn't really overuse um, things. When you see the snake, you see it once every six tours, and he brings it out on a song about snakes. That's all you need. He doesn't need to have it every song. Same thing with like the whips and the effects that they use at the shows. So Snakebite is a song that I feel really speaks to who Alice is, and it's a little funny story in there too if you haven't heard the song, so check it out. But that's my pick for 91's Hey Stupid is Snakebite.
All right. Well, my pick is definitely one that should knock you off your seat here.
All right.
So we are going with none other than the best song on the album, Burning Our Bed.
Wow.
What a great, fantastic. This has got to be probably my favorite song on the latter catalog after, once the re
Right.
it's just a great
Wow.
song. I couldn't believe how powerful of a song it was. It was just great. And
Well, there
and
are
it's
pretty
not a
much,
ballad for once, it's definitely
yeah.
a powerful song.
Well, it is, it sort of does have that ballad atmosphere to it a little bit, right?
But it
But
rocks.
it's a rocker though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I mean there's already two ballads on the record, pretty much with Die for You and Might As Well Be on Mars, which is what I thought you were gonna pick was Might As Well Be on Mars, because that's a lot of people's favorite on the record. But yeah, great pick though. That's a really good pick. That's a good song. I love this album so much. That's one of the three songs I didn't even consider because I know that there's five other ones I'm definitely have to pick through and find out which one's my actual
And
favorite.
that
But
makes it tough for you.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, Burning Our Bed's a great song. It's an early song on the record, and definitely fits the vibe and the tone for that era for sure. So now Alice sort of opens up and really embraces his born again Christianity, and releases an album in 94 called Last Temptation, which really, when he cleaned himself up after the Dada record, it became clear that he needed to do something to win his fans back and to bring Alice back. He did that with the next four records. And then I think he had time to really sit down and think about what, because there was 3 years in between these releases, which if
Hmm.
I'm looking, is the longest he had between an album in his entire career at this point. And he goes into Last Temptation, and now it's his time to start really embracing his Christianity and finding out who Vincent Fiernet is and how to live life that way. So he puts out Last Temptation, puts out a comic book to go with it, and a lot of visuals. There was supposed to be a movie attached to it that never came to fruition. He toured on this album for a very long time. When I first seen him in 1997, he was touring for this record. This album came out in 94. This is the first time in his career, and we'll see a repeated pattern throughout his career after this, where long touring cycles and decent amount of time between records. But he never stops touring. When he toured for Last Temptation, it started in 94. It pretty much ended in 98. Did a couple different kind of tours, like the Rock and Roll Carnival tour, which is the one I seen for the first time. Um, and my favorite song on the record has to be the song that opened the show after the initial little part of Hello Hooray. And that went into the lead off on the record, Sideshow, which I think is a bright Alice Cooper song. It's sort of a hopeful Alice Cooper song. And that's something that you didn't really see too much in his career. So I sort of like that little bit of shining light and light-hearted song to sort of start the record. But does have some really great Alice Cooper heavy songs on here, like Nothing's Free. Um, so go ahead, let's hear your pick. I'm interested in this song.
Okay. Yeah, this one, some very good, strong songs on this album. I was actually taken back on how strong this album really was, but he spent some time actually coming out, writing it and everything. Like you said, the longest, up to this point, it was the longest between the albums, and of course, it gets a little longer after that. But um, it's me.
Yeah, I knew it. I knew you were going to go with the ballad. It's a good song, though. It really is a good
Well, yeah,
song.
there's a couple other ones that I was looking for at. So when I played them, I once I narrowed down which the ones I wanted to pick on it, I listened, and of course, the last song I play is "It's Me," and because I went in the order of the CD,
Right.
and then when I got to "It's Me," you know, I couldn't go back any further because I this one is definitely my favorite. It stood out more so, I would give you as far as. It barely beat it, but it knocked off Stolen Prayer.
Okay, yeah. Stolen Prayer is a good one, too.
Yep. Hmm.
And I think that's why I like this album a lot because I think it focuses more on his vocals than ever before. And with these songs that are a little slower and more relaxed, you can really see that. And as I'm playing it to me in my head right now, I mean his vocals, with the uniqueness of his voice, it's nice to hear him
Yeah.
singing. I think that's why I'm not a ballad guy at all, but if I gave you a list of my top five favorite ballads, they'd probably all be Alice Cooper because I enjoy his ballads the most. Because even the ballads, like the other song you mentioned, doesn't even always necessarily come off as ballads because his voice
Mhm.
is so unique and it's such a unique way to do a slow song. You know what I mean?
And
And
just a quick note on this song, and this is something I just learned right now. I didn't even know it, but I can see why I like it now more than any of the other ones. Look who the co-writers are, none other than those damn Yankees of Jack Blades and Tommy
uh,
Shaw. Holy
yeah,
moly, I didn't even know that.
you didn't know that? That was something I
Nope.
have in my notes I was going to bring up and I forgot to. Yeah,
How
yep,
can you forget Shaw Blades, baby?
I
That's
know.
that's
Right,
their peak area there. And they made the after this is between the last area where they made the last damn Yankees album and before they made their Shaw Blades solo album. So yeah, that's awesome.
right. All right. Well, so after Last Temptation, we get two quote unquote greatest hits type releases. And the live Alice album, A Fistful of Alice, that was recorded in Cabo Wabo at Sammy Hagar's club, that features Rob Zombie on a track, Slash on a track, and Sammy Hagar on a track or two. Really good album. Also includes Is Anyone Home, which is a bonus track, a very weird Alice song. If you guys haven't heard it, definitely check that out. And then obviously after that, the next release would be the box set that I mentioned earlier, The Life and Crimes of, which I
Mhm.
think is a great release. A lot of demos, a lot of weird stuff that people haven't heard up to that time. Um, and then after that, we get into another era of Alice that's going to last for two albums, and that is the era of following people like Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. Now Alice dips into the world of new metal, heavier metal, a lot heavier than anything he's ever really experimented with. However, I do think coming off of Last Temptation with I described before as light and sort of hearty, it also is sort of dark in some of these songs in a religious kind of way, and that sort of leads in a really good way. It leads to the next two records, and the first record of this that came out was a Brutal Planet, which was released in June of 2000. So right around that time that Zombie was huge. Everyone was really embracing older metal like Sabbath and then Slayer and Anthrax. So he really wanted to sort of go in that a little bit. And now what's interesting is the musicians on this record, which I don't know if you know this, but here's the musicians on it. So Ryan Roxy, this would be his first album on guitar with him, who has now been playing with Alice now for about 10, 15 years. But he was in Alice in 2000. He left, came back, one of my favorite members of the group, but also playing guitar on this record is none other than Phil X from Bon Jovi fame now, and Eric Singer on drums from Kiss fame, who again, one of the most known drummers in Alice's later catalog. But this album, it definitely has a lot. It was produced by Bob Marlatt. The executive producer on it was Bob Ezrin, so you definitely still get his feel a little bit. But
Mhm.
this album took a little while to grow on me, because I feel the heaviness at first felt forced, but throughout time, the album grew on me fairly quickly, and a lot of songs became my favorite in his catalog. The best, in my opinion, being the Japanese bonus track, Can't Sleep, the Clowns Will Eat Me, but I didn't want to include that in this because it is a bonus track. But that's the most Alice-like song on this record. But the title track, Brutal Planet, is obviously classic Alice, still played today. But my favorite on the record is going to be a song called The Little Things. It's The Little Things, which is a funny, quirky thing about little things that drive you mad and piss you off. And I just think it's great in the Alice verse, hearing the things that piss him off and make him angry. And it's just a rocking song with a cool old school riff, but done in a heavier way. The guitars are tuned real low, and it's just a fun, great Alice song. It's the little things.
Okay. Well, I went with Pick Up the Bones.
Ah, great song. Creepy song.
Yeah. Yeah. But to me, it just stood out the best out of all that stuff there.
Was there any other songs that hit you on the record? Because I could see this album not being one of your favorites because I know you're not into the heavier stuff that much, but it's still an Alice record and you can still feel that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. You could definitely hear the Alice in every song. It's just not as much catchy as
Yeah,
some of his stuff. That's all. It just took you really. I think you really got to listen deeper. You got to have deeper listens into the music on these next few albums. But
100%.
but you know, give it a try though. Don't just discard it aside because you'll definitely find out you like more stuff. I think, as time goes on, it's there's very few albums that I haven't warmed up to that I used to just hate. But I hate to say it, but there's one album I'll never like no matter what. I just hate it. I can't stand it. Well, there's two albums kind of in that matter. One is Doc and Shadow Life.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, we
cannot
talked about
stand
that.
that album. It's not Dokken. Dokken doesn't do that shit. That's not Dokken in my book. And the other one is Kiss, the Kiss album with the grunge. Yep.
Carnival of Souls. Yeah. I
Never
was
can get
gonna
into it.
I was gonna use that when I was saying how you could tell it's still Alice. It's not like Alice's Carnival of Souls, where they really just went to one thing. I mean, that's why when I said earlier, Alice might be the only one. And again, now you can sort of see it with people like Lady Gaga and stuff like that, where they can
Mm,
go and do different things, do a rock album, do an album with Tony Bennett. I think Alice opened the door for all of that because he takes a style and he makes it if Alice was that style. So
mm.
it doesn't feel like he's jumping on the bandwagon. You know
Right.
what I mean? It really feels like he's infiltrating it and trying to
I
destroy
mean,
it.
he did jump on the bandwagon kind of with the hair stuff,
A
but he
little,
did
but
he did start to at least the two albums prior to Trash at least started going in that direction. You know what I mean?
but you can't say, "Hey, stupid," sounds like "Shout at the Devil," or "Hey,
No.
stupid," sounds like "Stay Hungry." You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
can't, or even '90s albums that the bands were doing. You can't say it sounds like "Slave to the Grind." You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So that's what makes him so great is that when he dips in, you just expect it from him. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't work so well. But one of the moments where I don't think it works so well is going into the next record in a Dragon,
Mm.
where I feel is I forget if it's my dad's last album in his catalog or the second, but from this point on, to a non-fan, it's definitely hit or miss to a non-fanatic. But after having years of dealing with a lot of these records and listening to them, I see how it fits the mold now. But Dragontown, through this last listen, I think is the most pleasure I got out of listening to the record because I really focused on some of these songs. Like Disgraceland, I think is good. Deeper is okay. I do like the Sentinel, I think is a really good send off to close the album. But my
Mhm.
favorite on the album is going to be a weird one, which is really heavy and not a lot of tonality or melodicness, which is weird for me because those are normally the songs I gravitate to. But Sister Sarah, I think, is probably the best song on the album, which is very, very heavy, tuned extremely low. Um, it just sounds weird, and I think that song grew on me the most over the years. But again, this album is by far his one of his extreme shittiest records in my opinion. And there's not much saving grace. Really wish he would have went a different way. Luckily, the next two albums sort of breathe some life into Alice. But so for this record, one of the saving graces on it out of like two is Sister Sarah.
Hey, I'm going with this album. Uh, Stood out pretty much, right away. Trigger Man.
Oh yeah, Trigger Man, good song. Yes, that's a good song on the record too. But do you agree that the album sort of lacks, I mean, even compared to Brutal Planet, it's it sort of feels like real bottom of the barrel, right?
Well, they definitely belong in this. They're from pretty much to me. They seem like they're in the same mold. But I
Yeah,
didn't really know. I say everybody says, oh, it's the industrial Alice Cooper. I didn't really see that. I just when I heard it, I heard a modern Alice Cooper,
sure.
not an
Sure.
industrial Alice Cooper. So I
Yeah.
didn't take it like that. Like that's how he was. That's how these two albums are classified, though. They're classified as
Yeah.
industrial, but I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as Alice Cooper. Like you said, he does his thing, see how it works, moves on. So in
See,
this,
I seen Brutal Planet as that.
hmm
Like I see Dragontown as trying to go even harder into that style of metal.
yeah,
But Brutal Planet was current day Alice at the time. Like that's how I view that record. And I think that's why Dragontown for me was such a letdown because to me, Dragontown feels like songs that were going to be used for Brutal Planet that didn't make Brutal Planet. So they put them all on another album. Like
kind
that's
of
how
like
when I first heard it, that's how it
yeah,
sounded to me.
kind of like beating a dead horse, but in a worse manner. That's all.
I just think it's the first time he chose to do a genre that he failed at. And but he did well with it on the first run, but then Dragontown to me felt
Mm,
like what some people said about both albums that they're just piggybacking off of Manson and Zombie, but that's all I heard in Dragontown was, oh, he's trying to copy them and he's doing it bad. But
mm,
he did good on Brutal Planet. So that but those albums still are welcomed in the catalog. And again, like when you don't have more than two or three albums that sort of sound the same, it's always going to be an interesting listen. You're always going to hear something new because it's like watching a movie for the fourth time. You're now able to pay attention to things you couldn't pay attention to the first two times. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Because now you got it all, you know what's coming, so you can look into other things. And that's why I think these albums slowly start to grow on you over the years. So now we're going to move on to The Eyes of Alice Cooper, released in September of 2003. Now, this was going to be going back to his garage rock stuff. He obviously stepped away from the heavier shit and wanted to move more towards this old school early 70s um, Alice Cooper garage rock, heavily influenced by the third, fourth, and fifth records of the original group. So this is where Ryan Roxie shines. Chuck Garrick enters the band at this point, where he's going to be in Alice from this point on until now and beyond. Basically his right hand man. Some really, really great songs on this album, like What Do You Want From Me, Be You Wild, Detroit City. I really like This House Is Haunted, but my favorite song on the album by far is What Do You Want From Me, just classic Alice. Um, Talking to somebody else, and you can sort of hear the frustration. Love the guitar riff, and love this style in this era where he's bringing back the classic Alice garage rock sound, which obviously accompanied bands that were bigger at the time, like The Strokes and Jet and White Stripes. And again, Alice did it the best, in my opinion. So that's my pick. What do you want from me?
Okay, perfect. All right. So with me, I am picking the same song.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yep, what a way to kick the album off. It definitely is a welcome relief for Alice Cooper fans to put this album on and hear that song kick things off. And the interesting, unique thing about this song is Ryan Roxie doing the co-lead vocals on it, and you can hear it standing out pretty good there. So the two of them together on this song vocally is great, and I think that's what helps make this song even better, in my opinion. It gives a little bit something unique with Alice because he doesn't do a lot of ballad or a lot of collaborations with vocals, other than like maybe a background vocal stuff more so. The Tyler thing is a little, similar, but I just love it, and that's why this song to me, and you listen to the rest of the album. I thought Man of the Year was cool. It was a tough choice. This House is Haunted. There's a lot of good songs on this album, but I don't think nothing tops What Do You Want From Me?
Yeah, no, great song. Wish you would bring it back. That's one of the songs I met Ryan Roxie at the last Buffalo show in 22. Can't bring it down now, but I have a signed CD from Ryan up there, and I mentioned it to him that you need to bring this song back. He loves that song. He was a co-writer of the song, and
Hmm.
that's going to bring us to the next record, which again, in that vein, Dirty Diamonds. Pretty much the same thing, bringing back to that Detroit sound that he really used that as a way of introducing and bringing this album to the public, is that it's that Detroit old school 70s sound, even more so than Eyes was. And again, some good songs on this record. You Make Me Wanna is very catchy. Sunset Babies is pretty catchy. Woman in Mass Distraction was a song that they sort of bring back from time to time. Also a very catchy song. Um, Again, I think Eyes was a lot better of a record, but this album still has some really shining moments. The title track obviously is a classic Alice that he still plays to this day. But my favorite on the album is going to be Steal That Car, that no one ever talks about, but really like the vibe. Reminds me of Under My Wheels a little bit, and has a cool, funny story behind it.
Okay, so I'm going with a different song. I'm going with Perfect.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Uh,
That had almost like a Simple Plan type vibe to it. That song, Perfect. It was sort of a poppy song, and I it
yeah.
shined on that album. It does. It has character on that record.
Yeah, just to me, it just stood out pretty good there, like a sore thumb kind of, but in a good way.
Right. Okay, well, that brings us on to this is where it gets a little odd. So he was going to put out this album called Night Shift, based on a radio DJ who things go wild in the night when he's in his studio. That didn't end up happening. He ended up releasing a concept album called Along Came a Spider, which is about a serial killer and how he takes limbs from his victims and creates spiders with them. Um, and a very unique story. I like it a lot. This album sort of feels like the 70s rock vibe he was going for the two albums that came before it, mixed with classic Alice Cooper imagery and horror. And that's what this album provides. And honestly, I think it's an extremely strong album that got very, very little love and still does. Luckily, it's getting re-released on vinyl now this year and on CD again. But a great album, extremely underlooked, has one of his heaviest songs that would fit really well on Brutal Planet called Vengeance Is Mine. Love that song. Very underrated. They did a thing of like 4 or 5 videos put together to promote this album that is just awesome and wacky, worth checking out. A lot of great songs on here that I can pick, including Killed by Love is a great ballad. Catch Me If You Can's good. I love the opening track, I Know Where You Live. But my favorite song on the album is a weird one called In Touch with Your Feminine Side. That just has this cool classic vibe, but also something creepy is going to come in the next few songs based on where he's going with this song. So just a great concept album, has a lot of great songs. I love hearing the difference of style between chill Alice and crazy maniacal Alice. So that's my pick, In Touch with Your Feminine Side.
All right, very good. Yeah, so this album definitely was an album to help bring Alice back again because obviously the last four albums all barely charted into the high 100s. So um, this one gets him back much better position here. Along Came a Spider, number 53. I'm going with Killed by Love.
Ah, yeah, good song.
You mentioned it. Yeah, great song. I love it. It's definitely one of my favorites on this not only on the album, but one of my favorite. It'd probably make the top 25, which, considering how many great songs this guy has, that would be saying something.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's high up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, another great ballad that only Alice can do like Alice. You're not looking for amazing vocals, you're looking for Alice's vocals, and he provides well there. And in the context of the story, Killed by Love is it's sort of like the ending chapters, showing you where he is in that story. And it's brilliant. It's a really good song. All right, so now that brings us to Mr. Ezrin jumping back in with Welcome to My Nightmare 2, which was very weird for people at that time thinking that he's going to put out a sequel to this album finally. Blue Pups. And there are some really good songs on this record. There are some songs that aren't so good. This is a prime example of even as Alice, you can sort of use too many different colored paints at once. And
Mhm.
he sort of does this on this record. I think they purposely tried to make every song sound extremely different, as the first Nightmare sort of did, but they went over the line with this one. And involving Kesha, and I like the song What Baby Wants, but a little weird. So there's some really weird stuff in here, but this is where Tommy Hendrickson, who's been with Alice since this record and still touring with him today, and another one of his right hand men, so that album brought him into the fold. Steve Hunter came back on guitar for a bunch of stuff. They used a lot of orchestrations and a lot of sounds that Alice wasn't using on the last 5, 6 albums before this. But there were some good songs that came out of this. The first single was "I'll Bite Your Face Off," which I thought was sort of a Stones type song that worked in a way. But my favorite off the album by far is classic Alice. Wish it was in the set more. That's a song called "Caffeine" that I just think is hilarious. Great guitar riff, really sped up song that I enjoy a lot, and just adds to the story of the nightmare where you don't want the nightmare anymore, so you're going to keep drinking coffee so you don't fall asleep. I think that's hilarious, and the song is just classic tongue-in-cheek Alice Cooper.
All right, for my pick, I went with the longest song on the album, surprisingly, and that is the kickoff track on the album, I Am Made of You.
Yeah, great song.
Yep.
It was weird at first because you hear the auto tune,
Uh-huh.
and Alice normally didn't mess with his voice with stuff like that. So at first it was like, wow, auto tune, but that song is really catchy. Chorus is amazing, and the best part about I Made of You is the guitar solo when that thing rips in and the song just blows up is just incredible. Um, so yeah, so you enjoyed the album then enough, huh? Do you think it was a good sequel to the original?
No,
No, yeah,
weak.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely think Goes to Hell was a better actual sequel, but yeah, it
It
fell
kind of
short.
it kind of reminded me of Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime 2 when you try to compare it to the original. It just doesn't even come close, not even in the same
Yeah,
ballpark,
right.
unfortunately.
Probably shouldn't have named it that.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So in this time period, Alice releases a couple live records. He releases an album from Wacken. He releases the No More Mr. Nice Guy tour record. Um, and then Hollywood Vampires comes about. He releases that album that has some originals on it as well as covers. Um, and then the next studio album after that is going to be a Paranormal. Which again I think brings it back. It's about half great and half it could have been better. But this sort of goes back into his maniacal phase with songs like Paranoid Personality, which was a single on the record, very, very good song. Um, and Fallen in Love is that bluesy song. Then you have Rats, which is like a classic um street rock song. So it sort of goes all over the board. But my favorite on the album is going to be one of the 3 songs that featured the original band, and that is the very airy, crazy sound of A that very, very dark, feels like you could burn a candle and just put all the lights out and listen to that song and um, see some spirits. A great song. The original band all wrote and performed on that, one of the first times they have on an Alice record up to that point. So that's going to be my pick, but there are a lot of great songs on this record.
Okay.
What do
All
you got?
right. So for this one, I listened to it a couple times, and the one that stood out most was the first one. Once again, the title track, "Paranormal."
All right.
Yeah, it was interesting that to note that Roger Glover from Deep Purple fame here actually uh, co-wrote that song. So that was kind
Yeah.
of interesting to see. I never would have predicted the two of them guys to get together to write a song. So definitely kind of unique there. But
Yeah, for sure.
nonetheless, best song on the album for me, and I love it.
Awesome. Well, that is going to bring us to Detroit Stories, which is sort of a weird album and honestly in my bottom three for sure.
Wow.
Um, a lot of covers on this record. I felt like he already gave a great nod to Detroit into the classic era with Eyes of Alice Cooper and especially Dirty Diamonds. I didn't really feel like this album hit that way that those albums did. It felt forced, a lot of covers. Um, Not too many great songs on here that I felt are going to stand the test of time, but the song I do like the best is going to be Go Man Go, which I got to see him play live in 2019, and that added even more to my love for that specific song. I feel that has a cool riff and stuff, but the album feels forced, and I'm not a huge fan of it. But that's why there's about three savers on here. That's Go Man Go, Rock and Roll, and Social Debris, but I got to go with Go Man Go being the best on the record.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so when I listened to these, I don't own this album. I had to listen to it like through Spotify,
Right.
but I was doing it, very carefully listening to it. And I didn't know the song that I picked is a cover, so don't kill me for that matter. But it's still, to me, the one that stood out the best. And I'm going with none other than Our Love Will Change the World.
Yeah, it's a good song.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is a cover. Again, and they didn't really put too much. They really didn't tell people too much that there was a lot of covers on this record, but it's clear they were going back to that old school Detroit vibe, and they wanted to
Yeah.
cover a lot of those bands from the era.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to bring us to the last solo Alice Cooper release of his catalog at this point. I'm sure we'll get another one in the next year or two. But and that's going to be Road, which I feel is the strongest album since Dirty Diamonds, probably. Although Along Came a Spider really holds a spot in me, so it might be Along Came a Spider might be better, but Road has some really, really, really good songs on it. Redoing Road Rats and Road Rats Forever is great. I feel that gives a more updated vibe to that song, a more show tune type thing to that song, which I like. Um, but there's some classics on here. Welcome to the Show should be a classic. It should be an opener. I got to see him open with that song. Great song. And then The Big Goodbye closing out the album is fantastic. But my favorite song on the album has to be I'm Alice, which I feel should open an Alice show or close one eventually. But just a really good way of basically saying, this is who I am. I appreciate all the years you let me do this for you. I hope you appreciate what I've been able to give you through the years. I'm Alice. That song when I first put that on was great. A great way. If this is his last solo effort, love this record. And a very heavy song at the end of the record, The Big Goodbye, which again is basically a love letter saying, I'm going to say goodbye now because I'm going to be continuing to play on the road until I die and continuing to release albums. So this is my goodbye. I'm not doing it again. I took that as you're not going to see a farewell tour. When I can't do it anymore, I'm not going to do it. This is my goodbye. So very heartfelt album in my opinion, where he's pretty much saying at any point this can be my last record, so enjoy it. So that's my favorite on the album. I'm Alice.
All right, I'm agreeing with you.
Ah, cool.
Hey,
Another one. What is that? Three now?
something like that. It's more than I would have thought, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, same, a great song. It stands out the most, and like you said, it's definitely all about Alice. And yeah, this album, definitely one of those ones where they're all about stories on the road. and it was recorded with no overdubs, which is cool because then
Yeah,
and he wanted to showcase the live, his live band on a record for once,
right.
but obviously, we still have some, Kane Roberts comes in for a track, Tom Morello.
Yeah,
Roger Glover plays bass on another track, so they get along well. He's even coming in playing bass on another song here.
yeah, yeah.
On
He's really close with Roger for sure.
so, but you know, definitely, it sounds like possibly this maybe could be his last album. As far as solo goes, who knows? Like you said, hopefully we'll get another one shortly, but it's hard to say. But we'll see. This guy always keeps busy. There's two things Alice Cooper is usually doing. He's either plotting his next tour or he's out golfing. So
Yeah,
those
right.
are the big things with Alice.
Yeah. And where he's golfing is usually in a random city that he's playing that night. So it's we get really we as an Alice Cooper fanatic, I never take for granted how lucky I am to have started seeing him at a point where it could have been the end of his career in 1997. He had such a fruitful career before that. The 97 could have been the end of but I've gotten so many records and so many shows out of him since I was 8 years old in 1997 that I couldn't have picked a better favorite band because the second favorite band I picked, Kiss, really screwed us a lot of the time. So Alice always doing it right. And that leads us into what Alice obviously did right, and that's getting back with the original band 50 years later um, to do an album for the fans. And while it took a little while for me to understand it, a couple of weeks of listening and living with the record, we they really did give us something special with the Revenge of Alice Cooper. And I think this album fans have been waiting for a long time. There was rumors about it for a couple years, but it really got sprung to us out of nowhere. And these songs as a collective are much better than any of the 3 to 5 songs that the original band did with Alice on the last few albums leading up to this. And I'm really glad we got a full release. The first 2 singles were decent, my favorite being Wild Ones, but the best song on the album, in my opinion, that sounds most classic Alice is Kill the Flies. Great intro, and just you trying to figure out the song the whole way through, and then at the end you finally do. So Kill the Flies, by far my favorite song on the album, but there are some really good songs like Money Screams and Wild Ones and the other single Black Mamba. And what I feel they did on this record, it's sort of like the other ones. It goes to a lot of different styles, but the one good thing corralling it all together is you can sort of tell it's the original band. It's produced to feel that way, and you
Mhm.
can hear that it's the original guys playing on it. Doesn't necessarily sound like anything before or after Muscle of Love, although it doesn't really sound like the original band if you're going to link them to those records, but absolutely you can tell it's those 4 original guys on here.
Well, it is 50 years later, and bands sometimes evolve. All
Yeah, yeah.
right, so for me, I'm going to end this with the song that is Blood on the Sun.
Oh, yeah. Great song. Yeah, reminds me of Halo of Flies a little bit.
It's like the only song that Alice didn't really have a hand in writing, oddly enough. It's just
Yeah,
a solo, written solely by Dunaway.
when it's done away. Yep.
Yep. And I was kind of surprised, that it's weird, but I love it, that song. I mean, I had there's a lot of songs on here, 14 songs to go through, you know, and when I listened to them all, um, I think Wild Ones was one of my initial, possible picks.
Yep.
Um, what was the other one there? Maybe What Happened to You, maybe I think it was.
Yep.
And then, but once I heard Blood on the Sun, no, that definitely I didn't think it was going to be budged from it. You know how like when you listen to an album and as you listen, Blood on the Sun was the sixth song. So
Yeah.
by the time I got through to like once I heard it, I said, well, this one might be kind of hard to beat. So then I listened to the rest of the album, which, is tracks 7 through 14. And yeah, Blood on the Sun definitely was not to be beaten for me. That stood out, and that's definitely a solid selection right off the bat. So that's what I had
Yeah.
that feeling.
Well, there we go. That's the whole catalog. And from the very first album to the very last, one thing that you can't say is that these albums get boring or his catalog gets boring. Because while a single album might get boring a little bit, the whole catalog, you can pick an album for any emotion that you have that day. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot going on in his catalog. So I think ending it out, I mean, my thing would be that I can't think of another artist that is more all over the board or offers as much variety or uniqueness as Alice Cooper does.
Yeah, there's not many out there that go this wide span of different styles of music and textures and all this other stuff. You know, he's got it. He's got it all from the beginnings of like the late '60s psychedelic music, and then he goes through all the classic stuff of the '70s. You know, and then he gets into the '80s, and you know, you can hear some of the cheese in some of the songwriting and the lyrics. You know, there was definitely some cheesy lyrics in there, which
Right.
got me shaking my head a little bit when I was hearing some of these albums. But you know, that's with anybody really from the '80s. A lot of times you have that, and then he gets into the '90s, so you know, and then gets in a little bit into the industrial. It's just like you said, it's just like never staying in the same place once.
And I think the character allows the cheesiness to be like when you break the third wall and a guy in a movie looks at the camera, an actor looks at the camera like, hey, did you see that? You see what we did there? Like that's what that to me, it's only cheesy if you believe the artist believes it. And I think that's what's so great and what separates him from bands like Poison and other things where the cheesiness sort of seems like it's from their heart. Like Alice, it's like, well, this is I'm using this to describe this kind of thing. And we know that. It's very tongue in cheek. We're all in on the
Right, he does it on purpose.
yes, we're in on the joke.
Our goal here was to give everybody a true interpretation of, you know, what we felt was not only each the best song off each album, but this is going to lead us to we're finally going to be doing it. I would say stay tuned in the next month or so. We're going to do the complete catalog, ranking the actual albums, which is something we've talked about for like 3 years. And
Waiting
it
on
was
you.
me. It was me. I have so much stuff I have to listen to on a regular daily basis. You know, just to give you guys a heads up, we got a lot of artists with huge catalogs coming here that we're going to be doing some stuff with down the road with different people and Chris and others that have been on the channel. And yeah, so there's been a lot of listening going on, a lot of things happening here, even though you guys haven't seen the episodes come out as frequently. But me and Chris are going to announce right now that we will take the Alice Cooper album, Welcome to My Nightmare, and we are going to do it from the bottom up. There'll be the second collaboration one that I have. So I think that's going to be cool because it's going to see where you see things as opposed to where I see things. And there's no way we're going to be right on the money, you know, when it comes to something like that, because
Right.
I don't know how many songs are on that album off the top of my head, but, you know, I did a collaboration with Cowboy Mock Bell, who, of course, as everybody knows, was the singer for the Joe Perry Project album, Once a Rocker, Always a Rocker. And we actually went through that album and ranked each song, you know, worst to best. And man, me and him we were in the ballpark on somewhat, but the first song I picked ended up being what he thought was his favorite song.
Right.
So, but other than that, we were pretty close, you know, with the rest of it. But I just
Well,
found that pretty unique.
there's 11 songs on Nightmare.
Okay.
So yeah, and again, they're all pretty different. It all is a different
Yeah.
story in itself. So that's a great album, I feel, to do that with. I feel we can do that with a lot of Alice albums. I'm looking forward to ranking the catalog. It'll probably only be about a 4 hour show, everybody. So
Just a
there's
forewarn, yeah.
a lot to talk about with that, and that's when we're going to get into some more of the details on the personnel behind the
Mhm.
records, maybe where it was recorded, sort of the vibe or what he was pushing for, and maybe we can even, talk about some of the demos or some of the stuff that didn't make the records because there's always a lot going on around that time,
Yeah.
different album titles, different things that all get worked out, and that's one thing Alice has always been good at is sort of filling the fans in a little bit before announcements are made. That's why we sort of expected the reunion record last year. So there's always something new and fun, and the shows he's on with Chris Angel right now is something new and fun. So he's always, even when it's not with albums or music, he's in the limelight doing something new and creative. So there's always something to talk about and something to critique with Alex. So
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks for coming aboard and doing this. This was
thanks for
fun,
having me.
and I can't wait to do the albums down the road. Stay tuned for much more things happening here on Rock Show Critique, and don't forget to leave your comments. Would love to hear some of the songs that you guys feel that maybe we overlooked. That's always a good thing to hear, especially when you got a catalog of this magnitude. I think this is probably the out of all the bands I've done up to date with on the channel here, I definitely say this is the biggest catalog. There's nobody that I've done with as big of a catalog as this right now. And nowadays, with the way bands are, you probably aren't going to see anybody make 30 albums ever again. It just doesn't happen. All right, then, take care, folks. We'll see you soon.
See you guys later.